Hello and welcome. I'm gonna go back a step here, a couple steps here. This is gonna be on how to create a domain controller or Active Directory. So this one, let's see here. Did you just let me? Uh, Oh, whatever. This one's just gonna be on how to create a domain controller. I've been fighting Hyper-V for the last hour and I'm having issues with AWS because I just want to make a server that just shows, but I'm just gonna go ahead and use VirtualBox. So doesn't matter what I call it, it's just gonna be what it is. We're gonna go next, next, next. 2 gigs is fair, 500 gigs is fine. That's fine. Finish. Now that will power on. Yeah, I've been having some weird luck with tonight. That in mind, trying to make something. I think it might just default to command prompt because it's going to use that virtual user. So we're going to, yeah, that might be the problem here. We'll let it go. Yeah, that's not what I want. So we're going to stop that, stop that. We're going to move all together. Yep. We'll try again. Let's call it 02. Same thing. Uh, doesn't matter. 2019 or 2020 also works. 2016, sorry. Or 2022. Two does work. In this case, I just want to use something that's going to work tonight. We're gonna go back, skip the unattended install, whatever. Just rename it. Let's see here. I'm gonna try. Yeah, these are the ones I just tried doing it earlier. Here, we'll bring this back up. Let's see. All right, perfect. This is what we want. Well, we're gonna install now. We don't need to repair. I'll just say we don't have a product key for now. I don't think it's gonna matter. If not, I will just go search for one. Accept the terms of licensing, which is fine. Custom install. 50 gigs allocated. And we let it ride. Let it do its thing. So I don't know why tonight I was having so much problems with Hyper-V, but it's all the same thing if you think about it. Doesn't matter which VM you come from. Now, sorry in the beginning, I didn't preference on anything at all. So I did a disservice if you're new in the IT field. If you're not and you already know, then this is going to be boring. But um, what you want to do when you get a Blade server or a tower, you want to go ahead and get that RAID configured. And then after it's get configured, you want to take note of how much RAM and space allocation you want to go and give. So that gives every single server to be used. So, like, let's say you have two domain controllers that what you really want, you want them mirrored, or you can have four or two for just redundancy. It depends on the size of the company and how big a service you're doing. And then you want like a SQL instance to do database stuff, and then file server, etc. And then you have an Azure sync server too that works with the domain. I'm not going to go over that one. That one's a little bit tricky to do, but in the case of just showing how to do it, I may go back to it later in videos on how to go ahead and just do that and look for certain things in Azure pen testing. But for now, I'm just sticking to straight. Just this is just Active Directory out of the box. So this is all this really is. I have a horror story on that too, and the reality of one person I had to explain until I was blue in the face about why you shouldn't have a domain controller as your actual physical box, like a tower or a blade server. I had a customer once that we tried talking to at least a few times, trying to make a roadmap, and they said we don't really need it. And this was a financial company, and they ended up having their server completely just go down and had the SQL instance on it. It was a domain controller and Active Directory, and it basically ran the business. So when that one went down, they were down for about 5 days in total. It was a quick turnaround. We sold them a new server, get it up and running, and then sent it off their way. They installed it themselves. And then yeah, that just ended up being a huge just problem because I told them like, hey, we need to separate this for these reasons and do whatever. Because let's say and what someone for whatever reason, someone needed to grab a tower real quick and replace it. You can replace workstations, no problem, because they're just workstations. But when you have a domain controller that is part of your that runs your entire business and that goes down, you want redundancy up the wazoo in case anything happens to it. So downtime comes into like maybe 10 minutes versus a whole 5 days. Like when you put it as a VM, you can recover it like with programs like Acronis, Bias on that one. Anyone else is old as old in the field like I am. Yeah, that's kind of what I did. That's kind of what I used. So in the case of using Acronis, you can recover very, very quickly. But in any cases of anything happens and you run daily backups into an NAS system, but that's not working as well, and the image is completely toast, yeah, your business is pretty much toast. So I try to tell everybody you want to avoid all those situations in general. So the reasons why we have these things and then try to get them mirrored is because again, do you want 5 days down or do you want to be down for like a good 10 minutes? It'd be like, okay, lunch, gotta fix it. There you go. So that's kind of the way it goes. But again, you can plan for the worst and hope for the best in some situations, but not all situations going to work. And if you have horror stories like I have, just as a sysadmin, let me know. But yeah, I had yeah, I've been kind of thrown in the ringer for some of it, like most people have. So those stories you probably hear are not something that's anything new or disheartening. We all have our horror stories working in IT, man. Um, and yeah, this is again, I didn't preface in the beginning of this video. This is going to be more on a sysadmin, how to build something out, and then later on, probably how to hack it in general. But in this case of showing how it's worked and then why we use Bloodhound to show things and look for different holes, this is the reason why. Because when you build it out of the box, not everything is up to snuff and ready to go, and you make up security groups all the wazoo. But if the OU that you create can end up biting you in the ass tomorrow. But it's a grain of salt in some cases. Depends on the size of the company. But yeah, this is why you want to run those things and then get an understanding about how OUs works. And then when you're looking at Bloodhound, looking for those users that are part of certain security groups, like let's say Billy Bob Joe has domain access in this case, and then that's what on an Active Directory, you see that in the OU as part of the security group. And let's say Jane from the dev department doesn't, and you're trying to escalate privileges, you want to look for that that lateral movement. And you're going vertical lateral movement, you're not going horizontal. You want to, because you're looking for the next person who has the keys to the castle. So in this case, when you create this out or you create a Active Directory, this a lot of things can just happen. And there's certain guardrails at this point. Like let's say um you want to help defend against attacks on like Rubus doing um getting the ticket from anybody or in general for a Kerberos ticket. You can create honeydew users uh, in a big environment for enterprise. Not the best, but you can do all those things. In this case here, um, when you're looking for things and you're doing the boxes, you check off while you're doing it. When you're attacking Active Directory, you can start looking for things that are different pointed out, like service accounts, or let's say Billy Bob Joe is the domain admin, right? Um, the domain admin credentials that he may have access to, he shouldn't have RDP. That should be in that group for domain that they have access to. So that way, um, you don't have people with keys to the castle and they're remoting in, and then that happens. But I mean, it's all hypothetical in some businesses, and I've seen done where I immediately just elevate my privileges thanks to just learning about Active Directory in general. So, but yeah, Hyper-V is usually the go-to too as well in most cases when it comes to most Microsoft equipment. Some people use virtual machine. I wouldn't say VirtualBox for like home labbing, but for like enterprise, it could also be VMware too. That's an option. You could have a VMware server, a blade server that's sitting out there. I've had that too. You could use AWS, Azure, whatever. So this is taking kind of a longer time than normal. Okay, cool. We'll just name this whatever. And this is probably gonna get deleted later anyways. Uh, I'm just calling it password now. Do you want to do this? No, you don't want to do that. No. Password does not make someone play the group and do a password 01. Yeah. Again, I'm deleting this anyways after I'm done. 01. Oh yeah, great. Password one. There you go. I'm fat fingering now. There we go. Uh, How's it gonna? I don't think it's gonna fit. All right, now Active Directory is not on this thing yet. Where we got past the Hyper-V part, we installed it, and password's ready to go. And now we have the next step, right? So we want to do that. 11, 2016. All right. So I'm trying to go back to making sure I'm doing this right too, and making sure of everything there. And in this case, we got everything. So we're just gonna go. Yeah, we'll say yes. Now we can just go here. Yeah, the next step, and if you're a sysadmin, you live not just in Hyper-V, but you also live in Server Manager for sure. And it's probably been about since I switched position. It's been a while since I've actually created an Active Directory on the fly. But usually takes me about an hour. Well, yeah, we'll get it in a minute. All right, so now it's done. Or it's not. Come on, man. You are killing me, Smalls. Yeah, now I collected service roles and features. Installation type is going to be a role based. We're gonna just click next, and then we're gonna go Active Directory and Domain Services. We're gonna add features. It's normal. You want a DHCP? Oh, it's whatever. You want to have DNS. We're not gonna put DNS on this. This is just making like you. This is the checklist I would go through. We don't need Hyper-V. Hyper-V would be on your host. So that's for sure. And then you can do remote desktop services with it too as well. We're just showing how to build an Active Directory server on the fly. Right, next. Oh, features. I don't think we need to add any features in this case. Click and then add. I think, yeah, I don't think there's any real features. Now, if you wanted to do like an SMB, sure, you don't want to use SMB 1.0 though. That's where a lot of SMB's attack happens anyways. You want to make it sure it's higher. Two, you also have a band limit as well. But if you're making a file server, this would be the way you're going to go. You're going to get these, but I don't think. I checked the Active Directory. I pop up add features, and then yeah. So then I don't need. In this case, we don't really need features from this. I think we're all good. Active Directory domain service. Yes, that's going to be next. Next. Well, we're gonna go back. We're actually gonna go not use these two. But in a normal case, yes, I would do that. But we're just simple Active Directory, get this done, get it installed. That's it. And then because if you wanted to make this for your home lab, this is where your home lab would be. So now we just wait again. It is installed. All right. I don't think we need. Yeah, we just need to go to the flag. All right, we gotta wait. Now we can keep adding, rules and features that goes with this, like anything with DHCP or so, but we don't have anything that's active on a domain. Like we didn't buy a domain in this case. Like when you get the certificate, you would add a certificate here. In the case of building out an Active Directory server, where we don't necessarily have a domain, we can call whatever it is and be local, which is fine. You can still do those things. You don't need to for a lab. But if you wanted to build out, you would definitely go get the record and then import it and then do the rest. But it's the same thing. I had to, I had to build a lot of this out back in school and during 2019 when 2019 was just new with server 2019, excuse me. And yeah, that was a trip for sure. It's almost done. Ta task details. Yep. All right, it's cool. All right, we refresh. I think we just making sure. All right, there's 80 of the server to a domain controller. That's because you're making it. So, all right. we're gonna configure the deployment here. Um, this is where you would add, like, let's say the certificate or whatever domain you want to call it. This is what it would be. We're gonna call it domain or bs.com. It's weird. I think we're just gonna add a new. Yeah, I'm just gonna make a new. We'll just make a new forest. We'll call it core bs.com. Whatever. Mhm. Go. That's right. We're not adding any records or anything. This is just going to be what it is, which is fine. Do. No, we got to give it a minute. Do. Let's see. Do I have any other crazy weird stories? Uh, back to directory. Not really. That's fine. Uh, it's self-explanatory. You just continue it out. It doesn't really matter because if you're doing this for a home lab, if not, you would follow the instructions from your company and then how to do that. But in this case, this is just a quick little home lab. All we're doing. Anything crazy though, I can't remember. I know I have some other crazier Active Directory stories, like things happening with other customers. I think it was someone doing like Azure and converted into a domain. They wanted to do an on-prem situation instead, and that was kind of a pain. That one was never going to be fixed, to be honest. Like they have to rebuild their entire domain controller from scratch. I know that was part of it. So other lessons that I've definitely learned, and I've definitely talked to I think I put in almost 8 months talking to Microsoft daily, going absolutely bonkers. And this is my experience. It might change now. I'm not sure. The last time I had to talk to them, I spent about 8 months trying to figure out if it's possible to do an on-prem from Azure, from the cloud itself to on-prem 100%, and then just run a sync server. They had so many sync, this problem, the company had so many sync problems, and I just couldn't, I couldn't just figure it out. And Microsoft came back and said, no, you can't do that. I've talked to like four engineers trying to figure out like, well, how can we do that? Because they had a user collision and because they were using a different they're using a subdomain, and that was yeah, that became a Yeah, that's fine. Close. We'll have to restart the PC anyways. Mm. Yeah, it's restarting. It's gonna once it creates it, it's gonna restart and build all the default they'll use on it anyways. But yeah, that was the other weird one. I definitely how that was a definitely a learning experience for sure. I oh man, there was I know there's a lot more that I experienced, but yeah, that was one of them. That was super crazy that I just couldn't just do. Couldn't where it's like go fix the problem. The problem is that you have to rebuild it. How do you tell somebody that when they gave you this thing that you inherit? So that was one thing. That was back when I was like the at this MSP that I was working for. Um, gosh, there was also just SMB up the wazoo. That was part of the problem. But that's a different story for a different day for a different topic. Uh, anyhow, but yeah, there's been a lot of stuff that I've even as a sysadmin that I got to really learn that applying into pen testing was super simple. If you're a sysadmin, if you're thinking about going to cybersecurity, it's going to be a lot easier transition for you to do the network pen testing. But if you try to do web and you didn't really learn about web, then that might be the struggle point. That's one of mine, but that's still decent though. Oh, let's see here. What other problems that I've actually ran into within pen testing? I think it was a lot of Active Directory came very quick, and it's not because you mismanaged it or if you when you create it and it's bad. It's because it just it's just as broken as Microsoft has made it, basically. I'm not saying it's bad. It's hard to defend now. It's one of the easier tactics because of it, because you can get these. You could do Kerberoot, you can do Rubus or Mimikatz. I mean, there's now in place that you can go ahead and see if the attack happens within a sim tool or whatever. But it's one of the easier vectors where it's like I can just run impact and go find more things out of it. It was definitely eye opener on switching to the next phase. And it came so it kind of comes natural because the more you play with Active Directory, the more you're natural with Active Directory, whether it be um, cybersecurity, working as a system administrator, doing Active Directory, making all those OUs all day, or dealing with security groups and making sure it's tied in. So the more you've actually played with it, especially in help desk, because help desk like nowadays you can probably use different forms and just to go ahead and eliminate someone's password. But a lot of the times, especially when I started, someone forgot their password. I can go to 365 and just go ahead and say, hey, just do the password thing over again. Or you just go in Active Directory and then you go find this person and that's how you do it. Well, we'll show you here. So what keyboard. All right, now we have corp as the domain. So now I'm going to go. Now begins the fun part. Now that you have Active Directory ready to use in this domain controller, now we have the ability to get everything running. So, and here. All right, so this is what's called the forest, and these are the branches. So when you create these are what's going to be added. All right, there we go. There we go. So we have Active Directory and Domain Trust, and this is where most of everything else lives. So now you have a company, now you have end users, and this is where if you build it out correctly, it becomes a little bit easier on yourself. If you don't, it becomes a little bit harder. And Sometimes it's inherited, sometimes it's not. It all depends on how it works. But as a lab here, I'm not going to go really in depth with it. It's this is where you would start using all the other things. So like these are all the users that are part of it. So in your corp system, you want to go ahead and create an OU again. That's not based upon it. You want to create a new you do group, yeah, whatever. Organizational unit. So this is the organizational unit. We're going to call this HR. So now, at HR, we're going to go to new users. We'll go Billy Bob. Say Billy. Next. What? I have new user. Now, when this new user is created and you have Azure Sync Service being used, the Azure Sync account will go ahead and sync that over. So within about a half an hour or whatever, or you can force it in the back end into it now. We'll actually have the user being when he's built, add everything else that's going to go with it. So now you have this user that you can go ahead and have with. But now you also need to create security groups. One second here. Oh, security. Yeah, so yeah, they would so we can right click on the we can do group. And now we have a security group. Now this being so you will come because what do you want to do? You want to go ahead and filter out the people that are going to be in this said group in HR. Because do you want IT to really take over some very important documents of HR? No, you don't want that. I mean, it's hypothetical here. Or, okay, let's say the finance team, and let's say the manager is having a rough time. Oh, okay, that's a bad example. We'll go use Billy Bob as an example. Let's say Billy Bob is having a rough time in HR and their manager is putting is making notes and putting it in a direct folder path on the SMB on your file server that's using SMB. So do you want that person to have access to his account with multiple complaints on it? No, that's an example. It's a very terrible example, but that's so in IT, the go ahead and combat that is you want to go ahead and create a group called a manager group. They go ahead and make sure that they only have access to that specific thing. Now, if you don't do that, your users will be able to go ahead and access almost anything and literally almost anything, especially when you start sharing things out. Because when you have that shared out, then that becomes a huge problem. Like I will make a manager group, right? Okay, so now I have within that OU, I have a manager group that's on there, and now I can add my members here. And so I don't want to add Billy Bob to that membership. I only want the manager group to take over this folder path. So what we're going to do, and I'll show why this is really big in security. Make a new folder, call it HR manager, right? Security. Now the administrator should have access to this at all given time. We're going to add manager. So now everybody that when I added into this group, the security group that's going to be used in this folder path only has access to this. So Billy Bob is not on here. Well, the problem I see, and I see this all the time, like even as a sysadmin, not even just in pen testing. Um, Now, just because he's not a part of the security group, this one person's already added on there. So That's that's troubling too, because when you have this person that only has access to shouldn't have access to this folder, he does. And a lot of the times they would own that folder. Now Billy Bob has any given right to go ahead and use this folder. which makes this a lot harder to manage. I see this all the time. And it's the thing that's been always a big, huge combatant in IT. So when you're working with Active Directory, don't get sloppy, put the proofs they're supposed to be in. But sometimes you get that inherited and you have to run the audits, and that just becomes a whole just mess of like, hey, this person's having access to that. SharePoint's also another example of that. That just becomes just this huge pain for later, too. But they use different groups, and that's all on SharePoint, not just this, but it's kind of written almost in the same direct or interactive way with Active Directory. So when you're having people that has only access to that one thing and that one person has full access over it, that can stop this group altogether because he can just go in and remove it. Because he has access, he has 100% access to that folder. Just because I am the owner um, of this, and we'll check here in a second. We'll go to advanced. That's the other part too. Just because I am the owner, he has also full control because he can block me out now. And I see that all the time where I'm running these when I'm running these kind of reports, even as a system administrator, not just a pen tester. I see this where this person will come up, or the person that owns this folder instead of this group. This person needs to go back into the group because let's say he gets fired. Well, you have an insider threat, and then Billy Bob had access to all this control, this whole thing, and you turn it off, and you have different plethora of different volumes of stuff that's in this folder path. Well, now it's completely gone because this person's gone, and we have to do the recovery password of it, and that just becomes a huge pain for later. I've had a handful of that as problems and tickets where I just came up and say, "Look, you can't be doing this. This is not the correct way. You need to put it into a security group, not in a person." So if you're new learning IT and the thing you want to go ahead and make sure you're understanding, you don't want to have one person have full access of this in general. And because he's not inheriting anything, he's just giving full access to this folder. He can stop you and almost everybody to going in. And then this also, too, in an insider thread, as a hypothetical, he could put what's called a logic bomb in here too. And so any given time, and he's gone, no one has access to this folder. You have this logic bomb that turns into this worm. The whole entire infrastructure can be compromised because this person have access because they didn't do a security group. And that's something to really remember on how to do. So that's one hypothetical that's really out there, but it could technically happen. But I've had insider threats or people gone up and straight, they left their position. And this is the more common case as a sysadmin. I had people left their position and they completely had, well, when someone turned this off, and especially when I worked at my MSP, they didn't know any better. I didn't know any better. When I got the ticket to go ahead and see what's going on with the folder, one person that is already completely gone or had full access to this, and this person was the owner of it, I can't recover that. I have to go back to the parent and say, this is mine. So when you do this to the child folder, you have to almost trickle down this effect to get the control back of that one path. And it's a huge pain in the ass for sure. It's not fun, but I experienced that before too. But yeah, this is Active Directory as a whole. Maybe more questions for people that aren't as new. This is basically how to set one up really quick if you're trying to do a home lab, you want to attack it. Because now that we have a user on it, we can do it, but do whatever. Well, yeah, but in the case of just in general and how to build Active Directory, this is kind of the way to go. And especially with home lab, little things I forgot, and I apologize. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this one. And yeah, if you have any horror stories too that you want to share in the comments, go for it. I definitely would love to hear them. For sure. But yeah, all right, guys, take care and thank you for watching and putting up with me too with this one. All right.